everybody. My name is Richard Green. I am director of the USC Lusk Center for Real Estate. This is Lusk Perspectives, as I think almost everyone on this call knows. And we are delighted today to have a panel on the state of the housing market, and in particular, the new home building, the new for sale housing market. And a couple of great panelists, Laurie, who runs the Olson Companies, and Adrian Foley, who runs Brookfield Residential. So it's great having both of you gents with us this morning. What I'd like to do is just have each of them talk for about 5 minutes about whatever they want to talk about, and then I'm going to be asking them each some questions. We'll do that till about 11:30, 11:35, and then we'll open up the floor to questions, where again, if you have a question, please type them into the Q&A box. Just also for your information, we are recording this to post for posterity. We have a webpage, lusk.usc.edu/perspectives, where you can watch all of our events. So again, the cowl wins first dibs on comments. So I'm going to ask Laurie to just say what's on his mind.
Well, lots of things, Richard, including mass. And what I can share with you, and we talked about this last week, this has been an experience that none of us have been through. And some of us have a vision for where this is headed. I think there's a lot of great unknowns. And a lot of those great unknowns impact us as a business. And it is literally right now, it's been a day by day, week by week, trying to see some type of trends as to where the market's going. So from my perspective, not much has changed around the true coronavirus, whether it's treatment. We certainly don't have a vaccine. What we have seen, though, is for the home building market, people are coming back. And traffic has been up, sales have been up. The 4 weeks of April were probably our slowest period for sales. We went negative overall on sales, which means we had cancellations greater than sales. It was our slowest period since the Great Recession. May has been a very different story. And a lot of it has tracked what's gone on with the financial markets and the improvement we've seen there. But what is occurring, it's literally county by county, city by city, zip code by zip code. So what you experience in LA is very different than what happens in Orange County. LA has been very slow. Orange County is on a different path to recovery. And again, we don't know how that plays out, but we will learn some lessons from that. But we grand opened a community in Orange County in Costa Mesa 2 weeks ago. And at the grand opening, we had 9 sales. 9 sales would have been an incredible opening before there was any coronavirus. And to be able to do that in this environment was exceeding all of our expectations. And by the way, the sales from 2 weeks ago, over the weekend, we saw strong sales. And this time we saw it across the board. So there is a positive sentiment happening out there in light of what still goes on with coronavirus. So I can't tell you where it plays out. What I can tell you is we've been very conservative. Builders shut down very fast in this cycle, much different than any other cycles. And builders are also not leading the country into the recession. And what has occurred, which is a public health crisis that's now become a recession, nor are we in the middle of it. We're literally on the sidelines. We're still building. I signed 2 start requests this morning based on the sales performance we've seen over the last 2 weeks. One on site development and the other to go forward on construction phases. So where we had shut everything down, we're starting to open back up. And what I will also tell you is the field has been highly productive. So the field never slowed down on the building side. And I think one data point that is very important, we have anywhere from 175 to 200 people on our job sites. We have full PPE. We go above guidelines, particularly in the city of LA, sets the standard for us. And fortunately, we have not had one case in 2.5 months on any of our job sites. And we have 8 active sites right now related to coronavirus. And with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. Well, Adrian, if you could give us your views. And I found Scott's statement about basically efficiency being maintained, because I've heard other people talk about how this has slowed down their construction process. I found that very interesting. And so, Adrian, if as you talk about your view of the landscape, if you could at least touch on that, I would be really interested to hear about it.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So, just for optics, and maybe perspective too. So maybe I'll speak to the sort of U.S. market because we are in other markets outside of California, the Canadian market, for what it's worth, and then specifically California. So I always like this data point. We left sort of March 16th, and I picked that just as a proxy date with this unbelievable sales record for the first 10 weeks. I'm sure Scott was the same. We had far exceeded our sales projections. We had significant. We think of our sales as really being the end of a conversation with the customer, and we had this pipeline of contracts in process, reservations, qualified buyers, traffic. So when you look at that inventory of supply, we left sort of March 16th with this really incredibly healthy picture for our sales. In fact, our sales for the first 13 weeks of the year, so through the first quarter, were 911 sales. And I'll fast forward here to this morning's story. We went from an average sales pace of about 300 sales a month to 60 sales in April. So our traffic went from somewhere in the 50 to 60 per traffic count per community range. So call it 600 or so, 700 or so traffic a week to 10%. So 5 to 6 traffic. So again, that chronology. Now, what I think we had in a lot of situations is we had buyers who were in the funnel, moving through the funnel, looking to buy a house. So we actually felt like for a period of time, we might see decent sales, albeit at a much slower pace, but still people buying houses. But it literally, to Scott's comment, it literally dropped off the edge of a cliff in April. May, and I'm looking at May's numbers here. May, we're 2x April already, although we do have 5 days left of the month to report sales. So we're 120 sales in May. Like Scott, we actually projected negative numbers in April, marginally positive numbers in May and 2x that in June. But we thought overall our sales for Q2 would be about 25% of our plan. We're already 2 times our forecasted sales. So we've seen a real bounce, a V bounce, if you like, in traffic and sales for the last 3 or 4 weeks. Similar to Scott, we've been fully active across all of our markets, with the exception of a couple. Austin shut down for a period of time. Toronto, for what it's worth, shut down for a period of time. Despite the pandemic hitting all other parts of Brookfield's business, we actually felt like we were making progress. And I'll jump in there with just a general comment. So I'm a little more heavily influenced by the commentary that exists in Brookfield's world today, as it relates to my own personal view and also the company's view on sort of a forecasting looking forward. But because of our business, our real estate portfolio is heavily skewed to retail, office. The residential, multifamily, and residential for sale side of the business that we're a part of ends up being the sort of glimmer of optimism, if you like, in an otherwise pretty gloomy conversation spectrum across our company. So that tends to, one, inform, but also skew my view. So what's been incredible, so I'm going to pull out the Canadian markets because I think they're, for various reasons, they're a bit of a misleading data point. Alberta in particular, getting heavily hit by the oil crisis. But in the U.S. markets, what's been incredible has been the resiliency of our development teams. How we frankly, we have 850 or so team members. 75-80% of those are working remotely today. I'm not, as you probably can tell, but 75%, 5% or 80% of them have been working remotely. I think we've, on average, lost between 5 to 7 days in our development, in our construction schedules. We've lost some processing time through cities and agencies, moderate, and we've lost some design time on the front end. But broadly, we've really managed to be incredibly resilient through this process as a development company. Our processes virtually have converted, so we've converted our customers' traffic to, and I'll just touch on that briefly, to a heavily virtually influenced traffic count. We would typically get 5 to 7% virtual. We're 30 to 40% virtual today, and I mean digital online information, touring online, virtual sales where a salesperson takes the tour for you, or we have a process called unattended access where you can gain access to the models independently of a salesperson. Those have all spiked, and in the last in the month of April, in the month of May, excuse me, I've gone up 300% across our traffic count. So we're really seeing people take the initiative online, virtually. I've been super impressed with that, and really have a completely different perspective now on how we see the future of selling, which is another conversation. But look, I think it's been an incredibly wild ride for the last 10 weeks. I think we're in week 11 right now of working remotely. I wouldn't repeat it. It's brought about some great culture testing for our organization. It's brought about some great innovation of getting people set up working remotely. It's brought about great innovation about thinking about our industry more optimistically for the future that maybe we wouldn't have gotten to. So that's the silver lining, and I don't like that saying.
So how about, so on the productivity side, it sounds like you're both doing well, but what about sort of the regulatory side? So things like inspections, getting permits actually pulled. Are you finding that that's an impediment to doing business, or are things sort of going okay?
I'll start on that. So I think that it depends again on what city you're operating in. But overall, the inspections have gone well. It's very relationship driven. And the difference with inspections today, particularly in the city of LA, is you need to have all PPE in place. They are out there. They are checking not just to making sure that everybody has masks. They go down to, they are making sure that there is water in the sinks and that you have full hand sanitizer and all other protective equipment available on site, including going through all checklists. And the inspectors themselves are signing into the site so that we can have some tracking that goes on within the site. But I will tell you what's also interesting is on the permit side, again, it depends on the city. But as Adrian said, we really have not been held up. We've lost a few days here and there on that end. But what is more interesting is the virtual entitlements that we'll all be doing now, because you no longer go into city council and do your presentation. It's now on Zoom, which has some benefits to it and some challenges as well that we're facing in this new environment. And one of the things as developers, it's a very different way to look at opposition because you're not in the middle of the room. And one of the other challenges with that is our ability to present our projects in those virtual environments, because we're still moving forward on entitlement deals. So I would say the entitlements are actually much more challenging than building today. I'm actually very surprised at how efficient we have been. I've seen on some of our job sites more trades today than we had before this occurred, which is very positive. And as I told you before, Richard, the one challenge has been the suppliers, and it's not China. It was the supplies with plants being shut down in Mexico that has been a little difficult, and we're starting to see some reopening there. In fact, our door manufacturer just reopened today, coming out of Mexico.
Yeah, I'd echo those comments. We've seen up and down the state, the cities respond really quite innovatively as it relates to servicing their essential services, housing. As an example, in the city of Dublin, where we happen to have a large project, the city did all their online inspections virtually. So they actually went into Bluebeam and did plan check for all of our permits that were being processed through Bluebeam. We haven't seen that as aggressively across all cities, but it's been incredibly rewarding to see cities sort of lean in. Scott's right, though. They're very diligent on our job sites, and we, like Scott, have had kind of the standard plus on our field for our field teams. So we have single trades in each home. So we're actually getting some real efficiency out of that. We realized the trades really didn't like having multiple other trades around them, despite the fact that we thought it was efficient. It may not have been efficient. We actually did extend the schedule, like I made the comment, 5 to 7 days, just to give ourselves more room. Frankly, that was more for cleaning and that sort of exercise. The trades actually have delivered. But back on the inspection side, so we're actually not seeing, Richard, any slowdown for inspections. I don't think we've missed an inspection in the last 11 weeks, and this is across the U.S.
So something you said, Adrian, during the opening that really intrigued me is the increase in virtual traffic. And have we gotten to a point where people are buying houses without actually seeing the house first? And second, how do you see this thing changing just long-term how sales are done in the residential housing market?
Yeah, so the short answer is we have had sales sight unseen. The information that we have today, so we have sort of a blueprint for digital and online sales, which happy to share it with anybody that wants to take a peek at it, but because we want to get it, frankly, more accepted across our industry. But basically, the expectation is the customer does a lot more of their own online work, and they do it anyway. But that they come to the sales office informed, if they come to the sales office at all. But that hopefully they can take a literal tour, a digital tour through the purchasing process to procure the home, and ultimately go through the whole of the process virtually without actually setting foot on site. Now, I don't think I'm here to say, and I'm sure Scott would agree, that overnight our industry is going to transform into a virtual sales environment where sales models and sales homes and communities aren't looked to be viewed by the customers. But we do think that as we turn the corner here post-COVID, that there'll be an expectation that a very high bar of digital presence is felt from the customer, to the point where they can, if they want to, pursue an online purchasing process. So now you go to my own view, Richard, of how this may help the customer appreciate the value of that in their purchase. We think we can offer, I'm going to call it a technology purchase and a traditional purchase as the two choices for a customer. It may not literally be those two choices, but we'll highlight that if you want to go the traditional route, that the expectation is you pay for that. And that includes an external broker, that includes an internal Brookfield broker, that includes all of the administration that comes with that exercise. But if you pursue an online purchase, that price will be different. And there'll be a materially different proposition to that online purchaser given. I think our industry has struggled with, more so in the last 3 to 4 years, with an increasing level of broker participation. I know from our standpoint, I'm sure Scott's happy to share his, we used to spend a third of our broker dollars per home. Now we spend more like 70%, so 2x that today. it's costing us, somewhere between 2.75 to 3% for each one of those sales. And frankly, right now we're hearing builders go as high as 4% for spec inventory sales. We're not weaning ourselves off of this broker cost, which the customer is paying for. So this is what's unique about this: is the customer today has been convinced that they're actually not paying for that broker commission when we know they are. So the NH, I won't get political here, but let's just say the Association of Realtors has done a really good job of marketing who pays for that broker commission. We think we've got to educate the customer that they can pay less for their home if they want to do it and do a little more work themselves. We're going to convince ourselves to be way more transparent with our selling proposition, so we start to reveal a much more open book of pricing for that customer.
I want to follow up with that a little bit, but Scott, your reaction?
I'm going to start with something that Adrian said earlier, and that was regarding the start to the year, which I think is very important in all this. So it was probably one of the strongest starts we saw in this cycle for sales and building the backlog. So similar to Adrian, when this hit, we had 60% of our business plan was done for 2020. What this has done is builders are like molasses with change. They don't want to change. We're never that proactive. I think Adrian and I are ahead of most related to technology, and some of the advancements we've done help today. But what went on with coronavirus really pushed us forward in a very quick pace, because if you wanted to sell homes, you need to do it virtually. What has not gone away, I was shocked at how many people wanted to come out to Costa Mesa. We've been doing open wall walks in Torrance. I'm still surprised at how many people want to come out, and it's a very different grand opening process. So we didn't do a true grand opening. Everything was done virtually up until that point in Costa Mesa. But when we opened, it was one appointment every 2 hours. So one family would come in, and we tried to limit the number of people. They got 2 hours to spend on site touring the model and then sign their contract, and then the next family came in. So it's a little bit of a different environment, but the touch and feel, I think, is still very important to the buyers. And I think Adrian's the same. We've sold virtually, particularly to buyers from China where they never saw the house before. This is different. And I think it's also going to change some of our designs and what we do with the house, which I'm sure we'll talk about further. But we already started going, and I know Adrian did this too, with touchless on a lot of the equipment and appliances and things that we're doing in the house. The connected home is going to be incredibly important in how people live in their homes going forward. There's going to be a lot of positive change in a very unfortunate circumstance that will come out of this, I believe.
Adrian, I mean, you said something that was very striking to me, and I want to make sure that people heard it, is you're saying that when you sell a house that involves a broker, it will be more expensive to the buyer than a house that doesn't involve a broker. Is that correct? Did I hear you say that?
You're putting words in my mouth, Richard.
Okay, sorry about that.
Twisting my word. Well, actually what I said was there's a traditional purchase, and we'll give people the option of pursuing a traditional purchase. And if you have a broker, that may be one form of a traditional purchase. Another form, frankly, would be you processing that purchase with the use of our Brookfield internal selling agent in their current role. But it's predominantly external broker focused. I would agree, and that price may be.
I'm sorry.
That price may be different than the price you buy if you or the offering package. It wouldn't necessarily even be price, but it may be a whole series of other things that we're able to do if you buy. We'll call it through a technology purchase. This is, by the way, is being done by a couple of builders in various parts of the country. I think we need wholesale acceptance by builders to try it out in order for us to really break the back of what is a ridiculously overburdening broker commission structure that's in real estate today. It's absurd. I'll get off that soapbox.
I didn't put any words in your mouth there. It's, one of the things that people have been talking about is the disruption of the sale process for some time. And sort of the metaphor people use as travel agents, right, is they basically they still are around, but basically got substantially removed from the buying a plane ticket process. The media, of course, has been very disrupted. The advertising model basically seems to be going away. It was strange, the New York Times now gets 2/3 of its revenue through subscriptions. Universities, of course, are being disrupted, and we're thinking very hard about how we make sure we remain relevant given what's happening out there. And people have, I think, been puzzled about why the real estate sales process hasn't been disrupted more. Because there are so many things customers now do online that they didn't do before. And it sounded like, Adrian, you're talking about one of the steps that might be involved with the disruption of that market.
Yeah, that's right. I think we all know through companies like Zillow and Redfin the transparency that exists in our housing portfolio today, resale and new home. I can look up my neighbor's home for a house that's a new home that's being delivered for me in the next 60 days. I can look up what my neighbor paid. I may not get as much clarity around how they arrived at that price, but I can see the home, if it's closed escrow, I can see within 30 to 45 days what that home price was. Why aren't we providing more as an industry to that customer to educate them on how we arrived at this home's price, just like we do internally? Scott sits down, we sit down to review pricing, logic, and we base it on demand. We base it on prior sales performance and a projection of our own absorption. So why aren't we giving that information to our customers? I think it will help them build advocacy around the customers, around the builders relationship, and prevent them needing to lean on a third-party advocate in the form of a broker, which typically is what happens. Buyers think they're not getting a fair deal. So there's a big opportunity here. This is a big shift that will take time to gradually move toward. But we think, to Scott's comment on one of the benefits of coronavirus, we think this will be one that we have an opportunity of jumping on.
So let me, with Scott, on a shorter term issue that may also lead to long-term changes, which is what's happening in land markets right now. Are you seeing discounts? Are you seeing new opportunities? How are you integrating the characteristics of the current land market into your strategy?
So there are, similar to Adrian and I, we are not discounting our homes in this environment, which is very different than any recession we've been through prior. And maybe we're just not at that point yet, but we haven't had to. And land sellers also have not had to discount their land. And builders, when they shut off construction, most also shut off acquisition very quickly, which will have a long-term issue. And that long-term issue is going to be, if you're not buying land today, you're not building homes tomorrow. And so there will be a continued tightness in the market because none of us are growing our future businesses right now. And there was a belief we would see discounted land. What land sellers have been willing to do at this point is every deal we had in play, we extended out. And it's very difficult to ask for a price reduction anyway at this point because we don't know exactly what we're asking for right now in the cycle until this plays out further. What we want is time, and the land sellers have been very accommodating with time. But there were a lot of deals that were stopped and walked away from that will take time to come back, and it will be a question of when that buy side happens. Where I think the interesting opportunity for a company like ours and Adrian, who will do entitlements and play in the urban arenas, is there is incredible stress and distress within cities, within counties, which will create opportunity on the home build side. And that opportunity will be created through land sales through cities, which Adrian and I have bought plenty of land through cities. And we just approved a deal through a particular city last week that they were eager to get done. And that's our first deal that we've moved forward on during this period. And we have two more behind it that are also city deals. Cities need cash. They are not going to get it from sales tax revenue. there is incredible level of collateral damage that has been done that none of us truly realize until we come out of the bunker on this. And I think cities will be much more accommodating where they did not want residential before. They will be more willing to accept residential, and there will be some changes, but there will be a definite need going forward. And the affordable issues, by the way, did not leave with coronavirus. They're worse today than they were before. So there's a lot for Adrian and I believe, to do on the land side to grow our business, but we're going to need to be patient. It's going to take time.
Adrian, you have any thing to add on this point?
No, I think so. So we think of ourselves as a lot provider as well as a land buyer. So I think just for optics again, we would typically close between 3,000 and 4,000 lots a year with third-party builders. And at the time of sort of COVID hitting, we were somewhere around 600 to 700 lots were in backlog. We would call it in backlog. So meaning they're in the process of being delivered. We basically had, as you would imagine, a lot of builders reach out and say, hey, we'd rather hold off until we get better visibility on how things play out in the second quarter. So we just said to all of our builders in the main, and if any of them are on this call, and we didn't say this, I apologize, but I'm generalizing. We said, hey, we'll forbear just like the government has on you needing to take down those lots. We'll push them out 60 days, 90 days, and we'll see how this plays out. The expectation was that we didn't know, but that we would have at least a quarter of zero, fairly low sales. This doesn't deal with Scott's broader picture, which is how does the future look? This is just the near term. So we basically pushed everybody out and we said, we'll see how this year goes. Conversely, for us, we put a freeze on all new land development. We said, we're not starting any new phases. We're waiting until this plays out. We actually think a combination of things. Now you have to factor in backlog sales. Scott mentioned his 60% backlog sales, spec inventory. So we actually think when you factor in backlog sales and erosion of backlog sales and spec inventory that didn't have a buyer, by the end of Q2, we think our industry has an abundance of supply for the demand that's flowed through in Q2. It will have. The math will play out that way. But that even with an optimistic forecast, Q3 and Q4 won't absorb anywhere near the level of absorption that it needs for us to start new lots. So we said, pause, we're not starting any new lots. So that was the land side of the business. Really, we pushed it out to 2021, and then you get into a discussion as to how we see 2021. On the acquisition side, Scott's absolutely right. It's kind of like the first opportunities in the market are what's in the stock market. We see the first opportunities in the market today as being public agencies desperately needing to balance their budgets. State of California is $56 billion, I think it is right now. It's going to need to dig in and figure out how to make PPP work, not PPP that is funding more public-private partnerships work going forward, so that they can get housing built, lots of land developed, and at a return for a developer to come in. So we see that as being an opportunity. If you want me to squint and look forward at going forward, we see a lot more distress in the land market in the near term, in the next, I'll say 12 to 36 months, just given how we see the market playing out for the next 3 years.
So I want to follow up on something you both said, but I just want to, so Rob Goodman is on the phone and he has his hand raised and I give it. So Rob, are you going to want to ask a question? Okay, I'm not hearing Rob, but I'll come back to that. Do you see this leading to just a whole reconfiguration of how states and local governments raise money? And I'm thinking in particular on Scott's point about sales tax. I suspect that sales tax is going to be depressed now forever. We're seeing shopping centers close in large numbers. This was happening before COVID came along. I think COVID accelerated this. You have, again, California in particular, seeing the problem with having a volatile income tax base. It relies very heavily on capital gains taxes for its revenue stream. And of course, while long-term high-income people are high income people, their year to year, you don't tax them on their long-term income, you tax them from year to year, that income is very volatile, and we're seeing that show up right now. So could you imagine a world in which, say, state governments rely less on sales and income taxes and more on property taxes going forward, and that influencing the industry?
I can go first on that if you'd like, Richard.
Sure.
I think, yes, someone's going to be paying for all this. And it's potentially going to be the property owners. And as has been discussed on previous calls, people aren't raising their hand to have their taxes raised. But something's going to happen here because of the distress, which doesn't go away. And a 2-month shutdown, I tend to agree with you, this is going to play out much longer. And I do think there's going to be opportunity on that. And I know you've talked about the split roll and other things, which are very contentious topics here. But states are going to have to figure out, Adrian talked about, where the state of California has a massive multi-billion-dollar deficit. That's not going to change. And you hit on capital gains. Sure, there's been an incredible stock market recovery. I can't tell you, neither can anybody else, where that plays out for the rest of the year. But I think there's going to be some fundamental issues. The state is broken in very many ways. And one of the easiest ways to see it is how this recovery is starting to play out. There's not a lot of continuity across the state. And I think a lot of cities will be left behind in this. And I'm really not sure how they're going to fully recover. And I can promise you, my building 100 townhomes is not going to be the answer to fixing some of these fundamental issues that cities will have, as with state and counties.
Well, so we have a question from David Nielsen in the audience that relates to what you just said, which is just, do you see people leaving urban areas to less populated states just because people are going to be more comfortable having more space around them? And where does this start? Does it start with younger buyers? Does it start with retirees? Or doesn't it start at all?
Yeah,
and I'll let you go first on that. Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was going to say that, it's interesting. I think we lost 250,000 people out of the state. We couldn't house them anyway. We have a major housing shortage. Is this going to change the way people look at housing? Yeah, we're seeing some examples of that. Is it a long-term trend? I don't think we know. Will people leave the state of California? They were already starting to leave because it had become so expensive to live here. But I do think there will still be very strong demand within the state. But it's interesting. Go look at the Ojai and Santa Ynez, Santa Barbara markets right now. They are having an incredible resurgence on sales. Some of those are second homes. Some of those are people moving. I think there are a lot of unknowns on how long this goes on for. If school does not reopen next year, which I tend to think it will, but again, I don't know. If we're virtual schooling and we're in our homes, it changes the perspective of people. And by the way, our sales have been strong, and maybe Adrian has seen this as well over the last few weeks, because people are ready to move. And there was a comment on one of these conferences where someone had mentioned about some people will move up, some people will move down, some people will move in, some people will move out. I think we're all going to be surprised by the level of movement that comes out of this. But I'll end it with this comment again. We are so supply constrained in this state right now, and Adrian's not building enough, I'm not building enough, and we certainly aren't building them at the right price points. So I think this is a question that we were asking before this started, and it's becoming more and more relevant today.
Adrian?
Yeah. So I would start with what's your view on people working remotely or working in an office environment? Which roles, which parts of each of our organizations collectively can be done remotely with zero impact to their to the culture, to the efficiency of the organization? I would argue whatever you think that percentage is has a high probability of viewing suburban living more attractively than urban living. I personally, and Brookfield obviously has made a big bet in frankly both, but probably a little more urban than suburban across our real estate portfolio. My personal view is people will still want to return to an office and work in a team environment and generate the energy that they get from working around people rather than working remotely. Certain functions, as I mentioned, I think can do it just fine, and there'll be a percentage, 10, 15%. Now, as a result, I personally believe urban markets will remain strong. Will Montana be more popular for those that can work remotely? Potentially. I sat on a interesting call the other day. We're building a development in Hawaii, and the guys commented that they were looking for people working remotely from California to want to spend 6 months in Hawaii and look to rent property in Hawaii for that 6 month period. So it may be that phenomenon, gathers speed. My personal view is that will be a very slow process, and there'll still be as much demand for downtown San Francisco, downtown Los Angeles, downtown San Diego, downtown New York as there ever was.
So again, I'm going to try. Rob Goodman had his hand up over the phone. Rob, are you there?
Yeah. Hi, Richard. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. What I don't, I'm a little bit confused about that nobody's talking about. At least my expectation is when the numbers come out this Thursday, we're going to hit 40 million unemployed. And there's been massive amounts of liquidity put into the system by the Fed over the last few months. That's not going to continue forever. So what do we think is going to happen when all of the money supply slows down and you've got 40 million unemployed people? And I know as the economy starts to reopen that some of those people are going to be rehired, but a lot of people are predicting by the end of the year we'll be down to 10 million. I just flat out don't believe that and don't think it's going to be even close to 10 million. How does that impact on the forecast for housing?
I love that question because it's one that I ask every day. And I think it goes back to, I could not agree more with Rob. I think it's somewhat ignored. It's how we're looking at our future business, because the question is, with 38 million people, and we go back to this, is it permanent or is it temporary? And I keep telling people, wait till the PPP money's gone, and then let's see who's really laying off, because I think we will see further layoffs. PPP gave us a window and gave us some time, gave us an extra 2 months. Not that much has changed in a positive manner for many businesses. I just don't see, I agree with Rob. There was a conference where someone was saying we'll end up at 10% at the end of the year, which I think was Mark Zandi. And that would be incredibly positive to me. But when we still see these claims at 2.8 million, those are huge numbers. And my biggest concern is the melt up. And the melt up I keep talking about is we're seeing these lower level jobs that go away. Next up is going to be middle management and above. And I'm already starting to hear it. And we have lost some people in the backlog due to this. The bleeding has not stopped. But again, I think the big question is going to be this permanent layoffs versus temporary and the outcome of the PPP on this. But there is no clarity. No one has the crystal ball on this. But I don't see it coming to an end anytime soon.
Yeah, I would add to that, and Rob, I think you've heard me comment on this. I think we're in a bit of an Indian summer for the last 4 weeks here, and we've seen a resurgence. I don't think anything we're going to get for the next 5 or 6 months is going to be a material trend that you can build a 2021 business plan off. I really struggle with that because I think, to your point, there's heavy subsidy going on in the broader. Obviously not with clients that are coming in and buying houses today, but there's heavy subsidy going on across the economy, and redeploying people at the pace that they were made unemployed is going to be an incredibly difficult challenge. Our view is that we think as a result, people will not go. We will have high unemployment at the end of this year, somewhere in the order of 12 to 14%. Hence roughly 20 million of our unemployed will go back to work and 20 million will remain unemployed. That has got to put a dampener on 2021 demand. And we're currently, and if you walk around Brookfield with a negative perspective on that, I don't think you're kicked out the door, because it could be even harder than that. But we view 2021 as being significantly down from 2020, even with this sort of protracted 7 to 8 month slower absorption. So you're absolutely right. I think we're in for a slog here. So we've got to be really prudent with what we buy and how we sell, and controlling our costs going forward. Our market is not overbuilt, to Scott's point. So we may find ourselves in a fortunate position that because the resale market is not oversupplying, and candidly, Fannie Freddie positions on foreclosures and how they're going to process forbearance payments and push them to the back end of sales is all going to help the foreclosure process, which really hurt us in 08, 09, or 10. So we think that despite all of those conditions, we're seeing a bit of an Indian summer here, and we'll level set more towards the fourth quarter and start seeing things play out more normally as to how 2021 plays out.
Yeah, I think I don't think we can overstate how important the forbearance policy of Fannie and Freddie and FHA is, and particularly now that they've said you're not going to have to pay it all back as soon as forbearance is over. It will be tacked on to the end of your loan, and when you refinance or sell or pay off the mortgage, in the end, that's when you have to pay it back. And so we're seeing, the Case-Shiller index came out today, and it's up nationally 4.4%. But if you look at the number of sales, they're down about 60%, but the number of houses on the market is also down 60%. So nobody's being forced to sell right now. And I think this was a very wise and important policy, but it can't go, if this lasts for a long time, there's a limit to how much you can use forbearance as a tool to prevent bad things from happening. But it is, I think, a very, you want to find some, I agree with you, by the way, Adrian, I hate the phrase silver lining, but at least we showed that we learned something from last time around. And I think this is a very useful, and it's a very low cost, in my view, thing to do. We have a question from Aaron Hershey. What position are you taking on cancellations due to job loss? Are you canceling buyers who have lost their job or experienced significant income loss? Or are you keeping them under contract, hoping they'll find work again and will be able to qualify when the time comes to close? Are you refunding deposits if cancer due to job loss? So let's go with you first, Adrian, on this one.
Yeah, so if you walked in and you'd lost your job to COVID, you have a choice. You can either get a full refund on your deposit. We'll hold your option money, just making sure we get recovery of your option dollars. But you get a full refund on your deposit, or we'll extend you 60 days in the hopes that you find employment, and we'll hold your house. So, we've had a few people game us a little bit. Candidly, our can rate, we didn't really talk about can rate, Scott, but our can rate's been quite healthy. And partly because I think we had a good, backlog coming in. People that were in long escrows, 4-month, 5-month escrows weren't canceling. But we have had a small percentage, 5 to 6% of a typical 16 to 18% can rate. So 5 to 6% of that can rate be attributable to COVID. But that's been our public position. We've made it very well known. And frankly, if you walk in the door today and you buy a house, we are giving you the acknowledgement that, look, we're going to work with you through this purchase process. If you lose your job, this is how we'll behave.
So Aaron, come down and sign a contract for a house, and you can see the policy yourself. We have the same policy as Adrian. And I think that it's going to be critical. And I love how often Adrian has mentioned customer. We are both customer-centric companies and take great pride in that. We will all be remembered how we dealt with our customer through this for a long time. And so we are handling it the same way. And I think what you just hit on, Adrian, the cancellation rate has remained incredibly low. And that's also why you're not seeing big discounting, Richard. We all have big backlogs, and there is a lot of money in those backlogs, and we are protecting our backlogs, and we are racing to the close. So that is the effectiveness of being in essential industries. We're still able to build. We cannot build fast enough because for Adrian and I, some of these homes are 4 months out. I cannot tell you what's going to happen during that window. So anywhere I have an opportunity to expedite, I'm expediting. But here's the other flip side. If you're going to cancel, we've been pretty aggressive on canceling the buyers that want to cancel because I want to replace those sales. And I don't want to end up, which happened to a lot of builders in the last cycle, where all of a sudden they're 2 months into this and they realize they have 100 cancellations in a 2-week period. So we have managed it, which I know Adrian does as well, very tightly. In fact, we have trackers on every homeowner in backlog, and we code them simply red, yellow, green. So we know where they stand, and we update it every single week. And if you're hanging out in red, we're going to work to move you out of that backlog very quickly today. But it's all about the certainty of close, and it's all about the customer and our reputations.
So here's a very nuts and bolts question that I find really interesting from Paris Silva. What technology or platform has been the most useful in delivery of their product? Additionally, what piece of your supply chain do you feel is going to be most disrupted after this crisis ends?
So I think was the question related to what sales software?
That's how I took the meeting. Yeah.
So I won't get technical, but things like Matterport would be examples of really high quality sort of walking tours virtually online. We have a product called I See What You See, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a recorded exchange between two people. So if I reach out to Scott and I say, Scott, could you tour me through your models, please? He'll take me through the common area, or take me through the model home. We can have dialogue like this with earbuds in, just have a regular conversation like we're walking shoulder to shoulder. It's recorded, it's sent to me. I can review it, play it back, watch it on my TV at home with my wife and kids, and we can talk about that future home. So it's that sort of I think that was that question. And then the second question, because I've gone on so long, I've forgotten what it was. What was that?
About what do you think will be permanently disrupted in supply chain as a result of this?
Oh, supply chain. So today we have a weekly report that comes out on the supply chain side. And again, I'm happy to share that with anyone who's interested. It is for internal distribution, but it is USC Lusk. So happy to share it. And it's across our mixed use business and our land and housing business. And as Scott said, really, we've seen very little from China, Asia. We've seen more from Europe, from Germany, Italy. Actually, less from Italy than you would expect for a country that was shut down. They were actually still manufacturing. And Scott's comment on Mexico was very relevant. So, but we are seeing lighting shortages in the near term. So anything that's made light fixture-wise in China, we are seeing some of that stress. We're also seeing, which is really interesting out of this, manufacturers deploy heavily into the US. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have two impacts. One, there's a lot more onshore manufacturing. Two, which is going to be interesting for cost control. Two, there's a lot more storage needed to store that onshore inventory inside in the US. So.
Yeah, Adrian, on the supply side, I think for our businesses, we're looking more towards not just North America, but US. So I have told our purchasing teams, you've got to find the product in the US, and we are over ordering for future phases so we don't run into some of these issues. But you don't realize, no one thought that we wouldn't be able to get doors for our homes because the plant's in Mexico. Guess what? I have homes that don't have doors. Now, am I closing them? No. Am I getting my doors in a week from now? Yeah, but I didn't expect to have a 5-day delay or a week because of doors. So we're learning lessons on the supply chains. There's more that's made in North America than any of us thought, particularly when we're looking at things on drywall, lumber, of course, the big components.
So what does that do to cost if it's in North America?
What was that, Richard?
What does that do to cost?
You know what? There has not been a great impact. The cost side is yet to play out. So commodities have come down considerably. By the time it reaches Adrian and I, we're years down the road. And you're dealing with massive suppliers here. Lumber markets played this smart. They shut down mills. They're holding up the prices right now. I would have expected lumber to be much lower at this point in time. That hasn't occurred. Are we seeing it on the trade side? Sure. You know where the cost is coming down? Right from the margin line from the trades. It's certainly not coming down because I'm buying less expensive paint. Lumber was down 16% at one point. It's headed back up. But it's coming out of the trade on the margin. It's not coming out of the labor wage side at this point in time. And I would just mirror Adrian's comments on technology. And we just set up that same exact program that you have with the face-to-face with the homeowners or the prospective buyers, Adrian. Our team's really excited about that. But we're definitely going more virtual. on sales. And the one thing I would add to that is the buyer is in much more control today of their purchase than they were even 3 months ago. So we're having to follow their rules and what makes them most comfortable today. It's not on our clock anymore, and that's been a big change.
So we have reached the top of the hour. So Scott, Laurie, Adrian Foley, thank you so much for a lively and informative hour. Adrian and Scott, thanks again. Have a good day.
Thanks, Scott. Good to see you, mate. See
Good
you,
to see you.
Richard. Thanks a lot.